Hey y'all, what is up? Keasbey here, and today we're doing another first for the channel. We're going to be covering my Floowandereeze deck profile, but for Master Duel. But before we get into all that, don't forget to drop this video a like and subscribe to the channel for even more. So before we get into the Master Duel Floowandereeze deck profile, a few things up top. First of all, unlike the TCG profile where I tried to streamline it, this one will be a straight out list with no real explanations except where it varies from the TCG version of the deck. If you are new and just picking up the deck in Master Duel for the first time, first of all, good on you. It is a weird time to do it, but I respect your decision. And next, please check out the deck profile on screen right now for a more in-depth breakdown of how, what, and why the cards, and these 3 ruling tips and tricks videos below. Again, due to the extreme hits this deck has taken, there are going to be some difference between Master Duel and TCG. Most notably is that for Master Duel, we are playing this as a go first deck. This is mostly due to the best of one format, but also partly due to our much more limited access to finding board breakers than in the TCG. And lastly, this deck did breeze through Platinum with I think 4 total losses altogether, and now we are comfortably in Diamond as recording this, so I'm confident enough to share it with all y'all. Alright, so let's kick it off with 3 copies of Floowandereeze and Rabina, the 1-card starter. Next up, 3 copies of Floowandereeze and Eaglin to get our power birds in rotation. Now we are departing a bit from the TCG with double copies of Floowandereeze and Stree. So we're doubling up on Stree because we're so down bad on consistency in the Master Duel version of this deck that we need to play Jack in the Hand. Because to activate Jack in the Hand we need 3 targets, we are doubling up on one of our usual 2 one-of birds. I chose Stree over Toucan for Master Duel as Toucan's utility is very hindered by only having access to a single copy of map, so Stree is generically easier to slide into early game plays. This also makes it so that if our opponent attempts to take one of our Strees off of the Jack in the Hand, we still have a second one left in the deck to make use of later. Following that, 1 copy of Floowandereeze and Toucan, our in-archetype card looper. That's it for the little birds, let's talk about the big birds. We're on 1 copy of Floowandereeze and Empen, still an amazing card even at 1. Following that, 1 copy of Mist Valley Apex Avian. Next up, another change from the TCG, we are on 2 copies of Ryza the Mega Monarch. So part of the issue I've had personally is that I don't like leaving Ryza on field, which between that and the 1 Empen, we actually can come short of closing out a game damage-wise, unless we chance losing our access to Ryza for the rest of the game if something were to happen to cause us to miss lethal. Having a second Ryza gives our first Ryza a bit more disruptive power, letting us safely use the bounce to hand effect to remove 2 threats from our opponent's field instead of just the usual 1. On top of that, a second Ryza can bounce our first Ryza back to the deck or the hand if need be for very grindy games, and lastly, it keeps us at a nice comfortable 4 search targets for Eaglin. I did test both Snowl and a double Apex Avian in here, but Ryza just felt the strongest overall out of all of those. Alright, hand trap time, 3 copies of Max C, this really should not need an explanation. Something that is notably missing is Dimension Shifter, so this is primarily a casualty of the best of one format of Master Duel. In TCG, first of all, we have 3 copies of Shifter, so the odds of immediately seeing it are significantly higher, a 33% chance in TCG versus only a 22% chance in Master Duel. While the deck is solid at re-emptying a graveyard so that Shifter is live beyond turn 1, the limited resources do make it a bit harder to empty out the graveyard while still setting up your basic lines. Back to the best of one issue, there are matchups where Dimension Shifter is more or less an automatic turn skip, however it does vary in other matchups from not being effective at all, such as in Kashtira, to being a 1-for-1 or 1-for-2 trade. While still a solid trade-off, I would personally rather use the deck space to punch up on consistency cards that I'm going to need to win a best of one, whereas in the TCG, we have much more consistency options available, and even if Shifter was only okay, I do have the opportunity to remold our deck in games 2 and 3 if I do want to slot it out for other hand traps. We are currently deep into Diamond right now, as of recording this, Diamond Tier 2, about to hit Tier 1, and I haven't missed Dimension Shifter so much as I've enjoyed having the additional cards to boost our overall consistency. Alright, let's talk spells. 1 copy of map, unfortunate, but that is all we are working with. We're going to go slightly out of order here and talk about our pocket map, Gold Sarcophagus. So I am playing this in the TCG as well, but I'm going to briefly talk about why it's so important in Master Duel. We play Gold Sark primarily as a one-time use map, letting us banish a bird directly from the deck, enabling any of our others to attempt to act as starters. It can also provide Rubina or Eaglin with a single chain block from Ash Blossom as well, but it is primarily just a means of getting another bird into rotation and enabling our other birds to act as starters the same way map does, so technically it's like we're playing like 1.25 copies of map. Back to the direct Floowandereeze support, 3 copies of Advent of Adventure. The only thing I will say about this here is that you will use it to search map a bit more often than you usually would in the TCG. Next up, 1 copy of Floowandereeze and the Unexplored Winds. Just a wonderful copy, we love it. Skipping ahead to our traps for a moment, we are on 1 copy of Floowandereeze and the Dreaming Town. Just a quick aside, due to only having 1 map, 1 M-Pen, no terraforming, a lot of times if you have the Toucan effect available, we're pushing to get 3 birds in rotation turn 1 at all times for this reason. You can take your chance on using your M-Pen search for a map, then banishing Dreaming Town with map and getting it back right away with Toucan. Generally speaking, if you've made it this far in the combo, you're in the clear since anything that would interact with Toucan would have also interacted with any of your other small birds early in the combo. But it is just 1 additional step to get to Dreaming Town, but it does enable you to use your Toucan to get both Dreaming Town and map for your opponent's turn. That's it for the Floowandereeze cards. Let's talk about the third-party accessories. 1 copy of Pot of Prosperity. I would play 3 if I could. Next up, 2 copies of Pot of Duality. Following that, 2 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Not sure if it will be semied by the time this video drops, but I've been playing under the new ban list just to be used to it. This is also a new addition as a one-of on my TCG list, and it's been alright. The restriction to only being usable at the start of the main phase is a bit frustrating when you really need this to resolve, but it's also part of why we're shifting to a go first deck since it has become a major piece of our consistency boosting engine, and going first lets us reduce the counterplay to this card to mostly only Ash Blossom, and there are hands where you don't necessarily mind this card getting ashed if you have other starters available. Next up, 2 copies of Jack in the Hand. Okay, this is not an endorsement for playing this card in the TCG, but rather something that we kind of have to do in Master Duel. Like I mentioned up top, we really do want to try to maximize our chance of getting Rubina, Eaglin, and Toucan specifically into rotation turn 1 so that we can go into our opponent's turn with not just Dreaming Town, but map as well. Map has become much more important now because we have to take the threat of evenly matched way more seriously. Whereas in the TCG, we can eat an evenly matched and just hold on to Dreaming Town with the knowledge that we have 1 to 2 more M-Pens in the deck. I play 2 personally, but I've actually seen some lists recently playing 3, and 2 additional copies of map in the deck as well. We can't do that in Master Duel, so the threat of evenly does force our Dreaming Town early. Jack in the Hand, as mentioned above, is also why we play 2 copies of Street. Overall, it has been performing exactly as needed, getting another bird in rotation, again acting as another card that turns Stree and Eaglin into full combo. It also acts as pretty solid Ash bait as well, which is always important if our hand is otherwise playable. Next up, 2 copies of Called by the Grave. So I don't really bother with this in the TCG as it is a one-of, and we have so many other means of protecting our plays, but for us to go first, we need that extra little oomph to push our plays through, and because of the lack of consistent map access and less consistency cards on the whole, we are a much more fragile deck on that turn 1 play. Even if we don't end up needing the Called by the Grave, we can always set it and potentially use it offensively later down the line. Next up, triple copies of Infinite Impermanence. So I actually no longer play Imperm in the TCG, but I have left it in for Master Duel. A few reasons. First of which is Kashtira. Mindhacker and Shangara can get our zones locked very fast, and Imperm helps with stemming the bleeding there. Secondly, this is a deck that, while I am going first, is very teched out to be able to go second, and Infinite Impermanence is just a very good modular card for going first or second, either to be used reactively or set to be used offensively when we do go first. Additionally, again, while 1 Imperm generally isn't going to stop a full board, it can either A, lower the ceiling on a board enough that we can crack it, or B, force an Omni Negate early so that we can push through an evenly matched on our own turn. It's just another reminder that the nature of Best of 1, the format of Master Duel, and the fact that we are trying to go first do force us to treat this deck slightly differently than we do in the TCG. And lastly, what I am going to continue to call the nice deck asshole section of the deck. 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More, not a lot more to say there. And 3 copies of Evenly Matched. The great thing that I will say about Evenly Matched that does come up much more often in Master Duel, as some players will just go ahead and take that Max U challenge, is that Evenly is not once per turn in any way, so jamming double Evenlies in one turn absolutely is a fun move, and it does work. Something that I will say as a closing note for the main deck, it may feel like a lot of hard go second cards for a going first deck. Well, again, since this is a best of one, I'd rather over prepare to lose the die roll and have to go second. We have a lot of consistency boosting to force out our plays, and the Dark Ruler No More does give us some play as well if our opponent cracks our board and we have to try to rebuild afterwards. If you do feel that this is too heavy of a blind second suite, however, I would suggest removing one Evenly and one Dark Ruler No More for 2 copies of Book of Moon. Book of Moon acts as a very good modular card similar to Infinite Impermanence, with the bonus of being targeted negation protection for our small birds as well. Okay, so let's talk about the extra deck. So full disclosure, because when I started really playing this deck in Master Duel, we were already having to supplement our consistency suite with Pot of Extravagance. I didn't really optimize the extra deck as much as I could have, because that would require more URs. But from what I have, I'll talk about what I think is a hard need, what you can skip, and what I'd suggest that I don't have here. Alright, so let's start with the XCs. We're on one copy of Recital Starling. This is a cuttable UR, but I just like it for weird one-off scenarios. It hasn't ever actually come up in Master Duel, and has only really come up once in the TCG. 2 copies of Assembled Nightingale. If you have space, this is only an SR, so you could actually triple up on this if you want, but because AA Zeus is limited though, I did just double up. 2 copies of Promenade Thrush. Same note on the 2 versus 3 copies, I just like having access to this. 1 copy of Downerd. Only one because you don't need her to make Zeus, but she really has no utility outside of making a Zeus. I would say this portion of the extra deck is far and away the most important, as it is what you will use most often, and we are going to cap it out with the aforementioned AA Zeus. 4 links, we are on 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. Only an SR, and I would suggest running it. It doesn't come up particularly often, but it is a last resort out to some rough floodgates. 1 copy of Wind Charmer. Again, if you want to spend a few more URs, you can actually swap this out for a Relinquished Anima in this list specifically. 1 copy of Dark Charmer. Again, not super needed here, but a very good to have card. If you want, you could also play a 2nd copy of Phoenix over this if you want to retain that last resort floodgate pop. 2 copies of Codebreaker Virus Swordsman. This is a must play, I feel, especially for Master Duel. Sometimes the response to Maxi is just to make Baguska and pass, and this is a very easy out to Baguska if you decided to go second, especially with the 2 additional, at minimum, cards that you will have drawn in the process of getting them to get the Baguska out off of your Maxi. 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn. So because we aren't playing Dimension Shifter, we don't have a proper target for Celine, Queen of the Master Magicians, so we are running Unicorn instead of her. I would recommend this card as it is a solid link 3 and makes our access code play a little bit better. I'd suggest having this even though it is a UR, as it is just generically strong to have regardless of what deck you are playing. Access code. Do you need it? No. Does it come up? Rarely. Does M-Pen and access code made with a unicorn add up to exactly 8,000 damage? Also yes. It's just another card that I like having in my back pocket. And closing out the extra deck, Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. You absolutely do need her, as Towers type monsters do come up more often in Master Duel than they do in the TCG, and we don't really have an out for a fair few of them outside of summoning her. So that's the deck. Hopefully this didn't turn into another 20-minute long video. Looks like it's just going to be 15. Very nice. Overall, it's a different experience playing this between Master Duel and the TCG, but it still does work well despite all the hits. It's just a lot less forgiving on the whole, and we have to play a few cards that I'm not personally fond of. As of scripting this, again, we are in Diamond 2, about to cross into Diamond 1, and I'm looking to push this deck into Master rank so that I can finally play my War Rocks against the best Master Duel has to offer. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop it a like and subscribe to the channel for even more, and I will catch you all later.